I'm Shatay.
I'm Scott, and we're the Hazers.
Welcome back to the Love Haze, where we always want to talk about how we can rethink the way that we love life. But this season, we're focusing on purpose work and the work that folks are doing to empower their communities.
Now, we all know there will always be a haze in life, but we can choose to show up whole and healed anyway, and in particular, working towards our purpose in life and what we should be doing in our communities to make sure that we are being the change that we want to see.
Amen. And I'm really excited for our guest today. We have with us Miss Flojaune Cofer. She is an epidemiologist who serves as Senior Director for Policy for Public Health Advocates. She is the host of a local political podcast in the Sacramento area called Voices River City. She is a member of the Sacramento Sister Circle, who publishes a really incredible Sacramento voters guide that I was really excited to learn about. And she is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and my line sister. Welcome, Flo. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Scott and Shatay.
So excited about this conversation. I really love talking about what folks do, learning how they got there. And I really want to just jump right in. And reading your bio, I really love this one line. It says, your work focuses on public health prevention and restorative justice. I thought that was just kind of like a really powerful statement. So can you tell us what that means? Like, what is your work and how did you get there?
Yeah, I always tell when I talk to students, I always tell them if you don't know what you want to do right now, calm down. You can let your anxiety go on vacation for a little while, because I have never been quite clear on what I wanted to do with my life in terms of jobs or in terms of next steps. I love the line from the Batman where he says, "Plan? Do I look like a guy with a plan?" Right? And I'm like, that's me, I'm the Joker. I didn't plan this out. I was just a confused and curious person who took Shonda Rhimes' advice before Shonda Rhimes wrote her book, The Year of Yes. And when people gave me the, option or suggestion, hey, Flo, I think you might like this, I said yes more than I said no, especially if, the opportunity seemed good and I thought I could learn something from it. And what I did was I learned exactly what I wanted to do, more, would get closer and closer to that, and also what I didn't want to do. And so I thought those were really important, learning lessons. So I think I've gotten to this place now where I understand my role and purpose, and that is around prevention and restorative justice. And so what that means to me is that I am a public health person who's trying to connect what we know to what we do. And I want to do that in a way that doesn't always make us effectively ambulance chasers, right? Which is, if you're chasing the ambulance, it's already too late. That emergency has happened, somebody is harmed, and we're trying to minimize the harm that happens to them. I want to be on the prevention side, which is let's figure out how to create a world where we need fewer ambulances and where we need fewer things to respond after the fact because we invested up front. And so I came to that as a core purpose because Frederick Douglass has a quote where it's much easier to, build strong children than to restore broken men. And I think that's very true, right? If you start early, you have so much as an opportunity, but if you start later in the process, and that doesn't just mean in life, it means in the process, right? Yeah. You have so much more work to do, and it's so much harder to do. It's much easier to maintain a healthy weight than it is to lose weight, right? All of these things are so true in life. And so I think I bring that to the work of public health of what can we do to keep people healthy instead of trying to make them healthier when they've already gotten sick?
So many things you just said that I really love. I want to circle back really quick, though, to this idea that you didn't really know what you wanted to do, which is interesting, right? Can you tell me what that looked like for you, though, in college? How did you choose what you studied? What was that? What were the next steps after that? What were the impulses, the curiosities, the things that even led you to public health?
Yeah, I sometimes joke and say that I picked up majors in college like people picked up boyfriends, because I was all over the place. So I started as a chemistry and chemical engineering major. I quickly dropped the chemical engineering and stuck with the chemistry. But then I picked up women's studies as my second major. And then I picked up math as a minor. And at the end, I was one class away and toying around with picking up a second minor in physics, all because I was really confused. It seems like one of those things, right, where we we praise people who seem to be doing a lot and seem to be, getting and doing okay with it, right? Like it wasn't as if I was on academic probation or something, right? But it was just a sign that I was confused and I didn't know what to do, right? And so I was like, well, let's pick up another one. That seems interesting. Why not that, right? Like, and so luckily I was in chemistry lab with Dr. Demanja, and we were doing gas chromatography research, and we were looking at organohalogens in breast milk. And I was asking, at the time, unbeknownst to me, very public health questions, not about the bench science of gas chromatography, but about what impact do these different organohalogens that are showing up in this breast milk have on this woman's ability to lactate, have on her child's development, right? I didn't know those were public health questions. That was just what popped into my mind. And so I'm asking Dr. Demanja, and he and I still have a great relationship to this day. And I think at some point he got sick of me asking questions that as a bench scientist, he was not that interested in. And so he was like, Flo, there's a class at Clark. I want you to take, do you have room in your schedule next semester? And I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? Another class? Of course I have time, right? So he's like, it's called Maternal and Child Health Epidemiology. Like, take this class. I think these might be your people. And I took it and I was like, this is what I want to do, right? So then I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to grad school in public health. And then as that's ending, one of my mentors said, what do you want to do next? And I was like, I have no clue. And they're like, well, there's this fellowship, you should apply. Have you thought about applying for a PhD? So I didn't just apply to one, I applied to both. And then when I got in, I was like, I'm going to take the fellowship and I'll be back in a year, right? At all points, it was like somebody said to me, hey, I see something in you. Would you be interested in this? And I said, yeah, why not? Like, that seems cool, right? And then over time, that just continued to happen along my journey as somebody said something or I saw an opportunity that I was like, why not? I'll put my name in the hat. The worst is they can say no, and that's okay too. And it's led to just a really cool adventure. And there have been times that I'm like, okay, it's time for me to leave here, and I don't know exactly what's next. And every time I think I know what's next, I don't end up doing that. And I end up doing something that's so much more amazing and that I'm so much more into. And I'm like, wow, I would never have picked this. And so now I've just leaned into the fact that I have no plan, and but whatever is going to come along is going to be much better than what I would have planned out anyway.
That's so powerful. It's so powerful. That's so exciting. I'm sure it's so freeing or inspiring for people who just still might not have it figured out, still don't know what they want to do, even around our ages. And I keep thinking about The Alchemist. Have you read that book? Mm-hmm. So good. How at each step, it just unfolds for him. Yes. And there's really something admirable about that type of faith, even just to like, I'm here, I'm gonna be present in this moment, and whatever unfolds for me in the next moment, I'm just gonna go with it. I think that's incredible. And it makes me feel like what I'm hearing, this is my interpretation of it, is like almost like your purpose, like you grew those muscles like at each phase of your life, right? Like started with a class, someone nudged you this way, and you're like, oh, this actually really is interesting to me. And like one thing became another and another until it actually became like this whole body of work that speaks to kind of like a more purpose. But you did not intend to get there at first. And I really actually kind of love that. Because most folks think you have to like be born with, knowing what you want to do. For example, that what's the movie that just came out, Soul? And it's like you want to find before you even get here, like why you're here. And that's not real for everybody.
No, not at all. I love that movie for so many reasons, but in particular, just the like enjoying the journey. I feel a lot more like 22 than I do like Joe in terms of I look for the joy in those moments, and I look for the things that I'm good at and that I'm attracted to. And then I think to myself, okay, what role can I play? I loved the movie. It really touched me. I watched it on New Year's Eve and I was like, oh, this is so good. Because I was just like, this is to me, and it's sort of, it allows you to not be so rigid about what comes next and to be able to, it's not just being present in the moment, but it's also like being able to understand that you don't know what's going to come next, but at every stage of my life, I've enjoyed the next part of the journey. And so I had a lot of anxiety, I think, when I was in high school and college, because some people referred to those as the best 4 years of your life. And so I was like so focused at the time on like not squandering this because this is the best that happened and it's about to be over, right? Like, can you imagine how awful that is? Like, never say that to people, okay? Do not tell people that high school and college are the best 4 years of your life, because it leads to this feeling of like, I'm going to peak soon. And then I might die at 100 and I have like 80 years left of just downhill nothingness, right? It was all good and now it's gone, right? And that's just not been true for my life. It certainly hasn't been easy, at every part of the road, but I have enjoyed this journey so much. And at no point have I thought, gosh, I got to get out of this one and go back to something else, right? And so I've always been looking forward to like, this is like a story, and there's nothing more frustrating than getting to the end of your Netflix binge and going, wait, when does the next episode come out? And you're like, when are you dropping the next one, Issa? Insecure is over already. You can't do this to me, right? And that's kind of how I feel about life. Like, I'm excited about what the next chapters are going to bring because I have no clue, right? Like, I don't feel like the writer on the show. I feel like a character that's going to sit down for the table read and go, oh, that's what we're doing this season, and there's something fun about that.
I had an old preacher who used to say when he would get to something, he would have this plan, right, for what he's going to talk about. And he would be like, you know what, we're going to take a quarter, put it in meter and park right there for a second. And I want to take this opportunity to do that because I think that it's so important that the information that you just gave about being able to find out what you didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And normalizing that for people, and also not feeling weird that maybe you don't know what the next move is.
Yeah.
I think we kind of put into our children and to our friends that it like you're hopeless and you're lost if you don't know what the next step is. But there's something to be gleaned from understanding that I don't know what the next step is, but there are people along the journey who kind of speak to you and give you nudges, and the universe kind of eases you along to what you should be doing. But also that it's okay to like take a step and maybe that not be it, and go back and do something different as well until you kind of figure it out. I think that's very much purpose work as well. Like figuring that out for yourself and not necessarily having to feel like you have to be stagnant, to figure it out. I feel like that's absolutely dope. I appreciate you sharing that. That's great.
Yeah. And it really does speak to just in terms of like self-discovery, right? Like you are learning. I think it's not wise to ask kids or even college students, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I am a completely different human being today than I was in 1999 through 2003. And so I had chosen something to do based on like suggestions from family members, but it wasn't necessarily true to who I was as a person. But in my defense, I didn't really know who I was as a person either. And so just allowing people the space to like you said, trust their process, trust their journey. And then I think the point that I was trying to drive is that I'm sure that it brought on for you a really incredible kind of discovering of who you are as a person, a human, a woman, right? How you present to the world and just things like that. And I think that's really beautiful too,
Absolutely. I think one of the things that stands out to me about how this has come along, and it's one of the ways that I feel like I've been incredibly fortunate, is that, sometimes you have people in your life who are not interested in your best interest, right? And they speak negativity or they speak harm to you. But throughout my life, and maybe it's a matter of me just being a little bit in the clouds and I didn't pay attention to those, but I don't remember people telling me what I couldn't do. What I remember is thinking, wow, there's a saying about how like if everybody says the same thing about you, there's probably some truth to it. And so I always took that to heart as like when people spoke life into me and then somebody else came along and said the same thing, I was like, wow, I didn't know you saw that in me. That's interesting. And I would like take like those little things and collect them for me. Like, people like that. Maybe this is something I'm good. Now, what do I feel about it? Right. And like, it was this interesting exploration of like, because I always feel like, sometimes you meet new people and you feel like, okay, maybe I haven't been myself. And then they say something that is like almost identical to what somebody who's known you for 30 years would say about you. And you're like, wow, that must be a consistent thread of my personality. Is like people notice this thing about me, or they notice the skill I have, or they notice this thing. And so for me, that was really helpful because, to your point, like there's this feeling of like, and sometimes you're like reflections of all the people around you, but there's this part of you that's trying to figure out, well, how much of this is me and how much of this is like a stage play where I'm playing me, and how much of this is what my mama and my daddy want me to be.
Exactly.
I think society is asking of me. And so it was really interesting to be able to take those and then reflect on like, do I like that? Is that really me? Is that, like, what are those things? And I feel like I sort of became more secure in who I was because of the reflection I got from other people, and then being able to ask myself, how, like, what do I want to do with that? What does that mean? What do those talents or gifts lead you to? What are the things that bring me joy? So I've taken now to, when I run into kids and, we typically try to have these like conversations with them. And I realize now I'm that old person that you gotten so big since the last time I saw you. Yes, ma'am. That's how biology works. I grow and I continue to do that until a certain point, right? Like that's how this works. But I have taken to asking them, what are you interested in? What brings you joy? What could you do without stopping? Because and then saying to them the things I observe in them that are positive, because I didn't realize at the time that I was internalizing those in the way that I am. And you think kids aren't listening, or you think you're saying the same old trite thing other people are saying to them, but it really does matter, because from a young age, people told me that I was good at certain things, and they end up being skills I use every day. Like I was the kid, if I was your friend, who if we had to convince our parents we needed to do something, it was like, ask Flo to do it. Flo will convince your mom that it's good and we should be able to go to this party, or we should be able to go on this trip, or we should be able to whatever, right? And that was a skill I didn't realize at the time, but was the power of persuasion, the power of storytelling, the power of, being a trusted messenger. I didn't know that at the time, right? And so over time, like when people see those things and you reflect on them, then you realize what that is, because it's kind of amorphous when your friends are just trying to get you to convince their parents to go to a party. You don't think that's going to be a career for me, or that's going to come in handy someday. You're just like, right now it makes good sense. And so that's how I've tried to like reflect back on those things that were meaningful to me that I didn't even realize in the moment, and how to then intentionally create those meaningful moments in other people.
100%. I do the same thing when I talk to folks, even grown people, like friends, and they're like, I'm kind of feeling stale or stagnant or stuck in the work that I'm doing. And my question is always like, well, what do you enjoy doing? Like if money was not an issue and you could wake up tomorrow and do anything in the world, and everybody's going to say travel, but like, aside from that, like what work would you be about doing if you didn't have to choose, like to pay bills? Right. And a lot of folks, it's interesting, still don't even know the answer to that question. I don't know what I like. I don't know, like just kind of social things they might want to do, hang out with friends. I'm always like, okay, what else, So I think that's a really great way to frame that question. And I also love that you affirm, in response to them, what you see in them. I think that's beautiful too.
And as you navigated, like getting to ultimately what you're doing, the work that you're doing now, like what was the haze for you with having so many different things that you could have gotten to? What ultimately led you to this work?
I realized that I do like people, right? And I enjoy spending time with them, and I enjoy working with people around things that matter to us. So I knew I didn't want to be in a space where I was working all alone on something and didn't see or interact with or collaborate with other people. So that was really important to me. I thought about long-term change. One of the great injustices, I think, is that so often, especially as Black people and certainly as Black women, we are not in a position where we feel the freedom to be able to explore things that aren't incredibly useful right now, because we are so caught up in but there are real problems, right? And so, just to be completely transparent, when I was thinking about, I actually thought at some point about changing my major to physics, because there are so few Black women in physics. I really was drawn to it and I loved it. But the question that kept coming back to me is, okay, but physics is so abstract, and there are real needs in my community. And am I going to spend my whole life doing something that maybe I enjoy and that maybe I can even get paid to do, and that I can inspire in some ways the work, but it's so far afield. It's like I trained other physicists, or I'm working on something that ends up being, a great innovation, but it's so far, but it may not be in a thing that meets the tangible and practical needs of like the community I'm in. It's not, biomedical engineering where I'm making, products and prosthetics that could, improve people's lives. Like it doesn't feel quite as tangible. And I think because of the way that we live, and the way that structural oppression and white supremacy and and capitalism like force our hand, we don't always get the freedom to do that. And so the two things that have come out for me from that are, I want to contribute to a world where that's not always the case. Where future generations of people can, especially Black children and Black girls and women, feel like they have the freedom to pursue those interests. And then I also want to continue to pursue the things that don't have to be my gig and don't have to make me money, but that bring me joy. And so I love to paint. And so I realized last year, in the midst of all the trauma and changes we were going through, I did 20 paintings over the course of the year.
Wow.
I don't sell them. I give them away. I hang them in my own house. I just enjoy being able to do that. And it's something that I do for me. And it was my commitment to myself to maintain some of that. But this is for me, and this is something I enjoy, and it doesn't have to be productive, because productivity is one of the perils of capitalism, right? Like, we all have to be productive to make something, to make money, right? And it's like, some things are just about what we enjoy and what we do for love. And we also have the things we do in service, but we also have the things that we do for self. And I want to be able to get to a place where, more people get to really choose and not have artificially constrained choices.
Yes, indeed.
Freedom.
I love that.
It's freedom. Like, more people have the freedom we all have the freedom to choose, but maybe it's more people feel empowered to choose, right? What they actually want.
That's great. Yeah.
It is so good. So then the next question is, how has this work in, public health impacted you personally? Like, maybe your career, maybe as a woman, how has it impacted you?
So I started doing this combination of policy and epidemiology work in 2011. It was actually end of 2010. And so the Affordable Care Act has just been passed, and there is now an opportunity for the Institute of Medicine is coming together to help decide on what services are going to be available without cost sharing or without a copay with your new insurance mandates. And so California was actually one of the only states that contributed to some testimony to the Institute of Medicine to be able to say what should be in there. And so that was one of my first projects when I joined the Department of Public Health, was helping to write those recommendations and submit that testimony. And it was really cool. It was a combination of maternal, child, and adolescent health, which is where I was working, and the Office of Women's Health. And we advocated for things like making sure that birth control was available for free, and making sure that, those preventive visits that we need people to have at least once a year were free, and like all the things that we knew were going to contribute to people's well-being, again, from a preventive standpoint, right? This is like not helping out when you're sick, but the things we should do to make sure you don't get sick or you don't have unintended pregnancies that you didn't want, or have them too quickly after you just gave birth, and all of those things. And so, at the time that this is happening, I'm in my 20s, and so when I first did my fellowship at the Department of Public Health some years before that, I think 5, we had a stipend that we were paid. But one of the things we weren't given was health insurance. And so I had to go out and find my own insurance policy. And my insurance policy did not cover birth control at the time. And I remember thinking so much about how stupid it seemed to me that they had a maternity care aspect, which was going to be clearly way more expensive, but they wouldn't pay, $25 a month for me to have birth control. So they're going to pay for a whole baby, but not, save themselves some money if I don't want to have a baby. And so it was really cool. It felt like a full circle moment to be able to advocate for that, and then be able to see that actually come to fruition, that is one of the things that is the legacy of the Affordable Care Act, is that we now have birth control that women don't have to pay for, and that is considered a free preventive service. And so that was one of the first ways that I saw, connecting the dots between policy rhetoric and the policy practice, and then policy implementation, which was the side I was on for a while. And I was really enjoying that. And so I leaned into that for 5 or 6 years of that. What is the implementation? What do we know? And how does it shape? And then I started saying, I want to go a little further upstream. I want to be part of that sausage making process of what we do as well, because the implementation flows from what policy was passed. And if I'm on this side of of working for government, I don't get to be involved in that lobbying process to develop the legislation. I only get to be involved in the implementation, which is important. But it's shaped by what happened before. And so that was really how I came to public health advocates and wanting to be in that particular space. And it's been really cool because we advocate on behalf of issues, and we're really focused on equity and on, social justice. And so it's been nice to be able to think about what I bring personally to the work at the intersections of all of my life. Growing up in a neighborhood where, we had public housing and Section 8, and we also had people who were in Jack and Jill, right? And so for me, that the caste or class segregation wasn't nearly as geographic as it is in some other places in the U.S. And so I think I've benefited from, having friends and family from all walks of life who were involved in the criminal justice system from an early age, who, experienced violence, who, have gone to schools that had varying levels of support and, and all of those things. And so those issues didn't feel, some of them are my lived experience, and then some of them are the lived experiences of people who are in my 1 degree of separation circle. And so they don't feel far afield to me. I see the way that it plays out over the course of people's lives. And so I think it gives an additional sense of urgency and a sense of commitment when those issues come up to really be able to push forcefully for them because they feel important to me.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, actually. Like, how has it shown up in your life? Do you get to see the fruits of your labor? And so I think that's really incredible to feel like, back to your point about being productive, everyone wants to feel like the work that they do is making an impact. Yeah. So I think it's really cool that you're able to, witness that in some degree in your own life and then in the lives of those around you.
Yeah, is really good stuff, really interesting too. And I think it makes me super proud too to know that we have people who are doing this work that kind of have even the 1 degree of separation in those experiences, because that gives a voice for those folks, right? And that's so important to have in these environments. The next question we have for you is around, like, do you think everybody has a purpose? And if so, how do we get to that?
Yeah.
How do we know what it is?
I think everybody has a purpose. Yes. I think though that, and this is my, anti-capitalist little rant, but I think that a lot of times we think our purpose and how we make money are one and the same. And so I think sometimes people struggle to figure out what their purpose is because they're trying to figure out how to monetize it. And sometimes that's not our purpose, right? Sometimes, and sometimes your purpose is to be a really great parent. And that's the reason you were put on this planet. That's the thing you were going to do, is inspire children, but you're not a teacher, right? And you're not running a childcare center, and you're not, and all the ways that we monetize, right? Caregiving for children. That's not you. And then there are some people who are meant to be teachers, but maybe not parents, there's this way that sometimes what we're able to do that's monetized is important and reaches our passion and all of that. But then there's also just the things that we're put here to do. And I think usually when people are really struggling with what their purpose is, it's because their purpose may not be monetized. And we're just so clearly focused because from a young age, we ask kids, what do you want to do or be when you grow up? Right? As if it's like this concrete one thing that is going to translate into a profession. And I think it gives people kind of tunnel vision on what their purpose is.
Mm-hmm.
I have so many thoughts around that, because I'm actually one of the folks that is always like, if you can figure out a way to monetize what you like to do, go for it, because I'm 1000% a supporter for like career fulfillment. I'm thinking like, if there's a way that you can feel somehow connected. Matter of fact, my graduate school thesis was on the connection between dance and spirituality. And so for me, it was very much a personal quest of research to understand how I feel like at the core of me fulfilled by this body movement or, dance. And so my thinking was then everybody should feel this way. And how can everybody, monetize the thing that fulfills them, to the core of them. So I think that's a really interesting thought that challenges even how I feel about, like, if you can make money doing what you love to do, like, figure out how to do it. So I guess I'm just now reflecting, but what then what are your suggestions then for folks who might be in a line of work, they're not able to leave it for whatever reason, they're not really passionate about it, but they're still trying to understand what their purpose might be? Like, what does that person do then?
So, it's interesting because I've been trying to do a lot of reading on this and really thinking through it. So I'm thinking through it with you, Shate. Yeah. But one of the things that I'm taking away from a book I don't necessarily want to name because I'm only part of the way through it. I'm not sure if I'm going to love it. And it also is a little more capitalist than I love. But it's like super vague. But one of the things that I'm taking away from this book, and I'm always trying to pull the nuggets and like hear from different perspectives, is this idea of like how our lives are set up and structured because of capitalism and because of the working and productive years of your life, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's set up so that you're supposed to work. And then there's supposed to be this time when you're older and potentially maybe a little less productive where you're supposed to put off all your hopes and dreams and save up all your extra money so then you can really enjoy life then. And that's supposedly the retirement phase, right? Mm-hmm. But, if we recognize that we're not all guaranteed to live maybe that long, right? And we don't know what's going to happen in between, why would we hold on and wait to put off all the good stuff till later, right? The only reason we would do that is in service of capitalism, because it says these are your productive good years where your body is your best and your mind is the best. And so this is when you should be giving the most capital to this system. And so I'm wondering, what if we spin that on its head and say, I'm going to try to enjoy as much of what I have every day and every year of my life. And, in hopes that, my retirement, as the way I think of it, is really a fail-safe in the event that I'm unable to continue doing the things that I do. But what if we build a life that is fulfilling to us, that we're not waiting to get out of so we can finally enjoy the fruits of our labor? And so, to your question about like monetizing the things you love, I would never tell anybody not to do that, right? Like there's a way, like I'm a booster of the arts. I support, like I believe in the arts. I believe in these things that are not always, and I bring them up because they're not always as easily monetized. And I think they provide a public good. And I think that their public good that they provide is often overlooked, right? Like we subsidize vegetables because we know people need to eat them and it's important to make sure they're affordable. Like we should also subsidize the arts. We should subsidize these other things. So I think there's a part of that will always ring true for me. But there also is this part of me that's like, what does it look like if we structure our lives around the things that give us joy and that allow us to survive instead of trying to live someone else's dream of having houses that are so big we can't keep them clean and we can't keep them full, right? And having all of these things that are supposed to make us happy and then eventually being able to enjoy them someday when we stop working 100 hours a week. We're someday supposed to then enjoy the fruits of our labor. And what if we were a little more, I know all of the financial planners are going to want to fight me for this, but a little more short-sighted in our goals and in our joy. And we distributed them throughout our lives instead of hoarding them and then trying to experience it all at one time.
100% agree.
And I think one of the things that speaks to me, and I'll say this really resonates for me because we've had a great deal of discussions about both and. Right. Yep. I want to be a provider. I want to, find my purpose. I want to do all those things. But I've allowed this idea that, we got to have multiple streams of income in order to be successful. We got to monetize, even in talking about the work and the purpose that we feel behind this podcast. Right. There is a duty that I feel like we have to our people to get information out that will be helpful. Yeah. Like I feel like my main gig is for me to finance this portion, for us to have home internet, right? So
I love it.
This part of the work, which really brings me joy, right? Because I don't want to be a person who just, sits on Facebook and fusses about the things that, we need to be doing. We really need to be sharing the information, getting rid of some of those ideas that maybe the media gives us that Black folks aren't out here doing this work. Like this is proof positive that Black folks are out here doing this work. It is not always work that we just get paid for, right? These are things that we love and that we're passionate about, and we're pushing other people to find their passion as well. Even with our desire to be parents, right? I feel like the stuff that I do from 9 to 5, I'm passionate about the work that I do with, therapy with my veterans and that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I think that I'm purposed to be a good husband and a good father.
Mm-hmm.
So, my push is really towards, and I ain't got to make no money from that.
Yeah.
Right. I'm probably going to teach the next leader of the free world what he should be doing in order to come into manhood, to be a good husband and to be a good father. And that has to be enough reward for me that I'm not getting paid for. I think that our rewards will come like on the back end. It may not be stuff that I'll click on and see in my Bank of America account, but that purpose work and the things that you're passionate about and the things that you love, I think the reward for those and the payment for those exists like many generations down the line that we may never see. And that's what makes it important to me. And I have actively struggled with that thing. Like, all right, now how do I get money for that? How do I get some merch?
Yeah.
How do I do these things that people say that you're supposed to be doing? But that's the difference between, being out here, just existing and actually living and having a well-lived life.
That's a perfect example. I was just thinking when you were saying that, like, we've been toying, like, do we have merchandise? Like, do we do affiliate sales? And I think what I've just settled in, like, maybe just the doing of this is enough, right? Like, the body of work is enough. It does not have to bring in any income in any way, small or large, because to your point, what we do daily, our day to day, we're both very passionate about. And I really like that. Just have the permission to, it is freeing, have the permission to like do something for the joy of it and it not have to reap any financial, I guess, gains. That's really cool.
And it would be really cool to be able to live in a world where we had some collective purpose and responsibility, right? And then where we were also able to pursue our passions and not feel like we were going to have to live in abject poverty in order to do so, right? Like, to make it a little bit political. I mean, that's how I kind of came to, more anti-capitalist perspectives on the world is like, what kind of world do I want to build and live in? And I want to live in a world where we can, share the responsibility of maybe cleaning some things and, cooking something and then we all have the ability to be able to do more of the things that we enjoy. And also the ability to be able to do some of the things that we're really passionate about or want to see happen. And I think so much of our potential and so much of our talent, and so much of who we are is driven into these, prefab buckets of how we're supposed to be and what can we do to shake that up. And a lot of that is driven by capitalism. It's driven by our need to survive, and then our desire to be able to consume in some ways. And so what happens if we kind of turn that model on its head and do something different?
Yeah, I think the aha moment that I'm actively having is that, in our household growing up, my mom is always very much, you're either producer or consumer. And there is space for both but like, don't be a person that is always consuming. Like you need to produce something. And so for me, and this is not pushed on me by her, I've just always equated producing with like monetizing and like kind of financial successes. But I also believe that there is abundance that is not financial. There's an abundance of peace and joy and love and hope and laughter and all of those things. And so now what I'm feeling is that I can be productive in a way that produces those fruits that aren't necessarily tangible. So that's a nice aha moment to have. Thanks, Flo. I appreciate that.
It's funny the way that we kind of have like negative connotations with things that just exist, right? So, there's like the saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think so many people take that to mean, obviously you need to gather some people and go far. But sometimes you just want to go fast. Fast is not a negative. It's speed, right? But somehow we internalize that as if we're going alone and we're going fast, it's somehow worse than moving slower and going together. And that's not always the case. And so I think it's the same. We sometimes paint ourselves into these boxes, right? Consumer or producer, right? Without the acknowledgement that we can do both or we can do something entirely different, right? Like those aren't our only options. Our only options aren't to go fast or to go together. We could go, at a moderate pace with a few people, right? Like let's think about this a little bit. And let's also think about like how it's not inherently negative to do the other things sometimes, right? It's not inherently negative to consume. When it comes to books, I have no plans to write one. So I am going to be a consumer of the literary arts for my entire life. And I think I am a better person for it. Despite the fact that I got good knees and I could probably twerk very well, I'm not going to be a professional dancer. And so you know what you're going to get? These living room performances. And that's about the extent of this. And that's going to be okay for me, right? I'm going to be a consumer of the performing arts as well. And so I think where we produce and where we consume, again, comes down to what are we passionate about and what does it mean for us and what is our what are the things we're talented in, what are the things we're skilled in. And I think the more that we can lift up the things that people have to offer in terms of their skills and who they are, the better people are able to tap into that passion and then to be able to say, okay, how do I survive and what brings me joy? And I think those are the two questions that always rise to the top of my mind in a lived life is, can I look back on it and say, was I able to survive? Because there is a minimum level of life that I think, that I think most people want to live. And I believe that that's a public good. I believe it's a human right to be able to have housing and clean water and clean air and, and space to be able to be outside and all of those kinds of things. And so I want to make sure that at a personal, but also at a communal level, that is afforded to us. And then also, what are the things that bring us joy? And I think a good life combines being able to answer both of those with a long list.
Oh, come on here, Flo. Yes, ma'am. That was just beautiful. You better preach. And then you've already said a ton of nuggets that someone could take away from. But is there any one piece of advice that sums it all up? Like the biggest thing, maybe it's like what's the one thing that you would tell your younger self about this idea of like purpose and work?
Yeah. I think I would tell my younger self to breathe and to relax and to be okay with not having it all figured out, and that's actually kind of the fun of it, because it would be really boring if you knew everything that was going to happen in your life from the moment you were born. You're just like, all right, well, today's the day I fall down the sinkhole, and then it's like, and then tomorrow's the day where I win the big prize. Like, there's no revelation, there's no joy to knowing everything that's going to happen and have it all mapped out. So it doesn't mean having goals or dreams for yourself that you can work toward. I mean, I think for many people that works, but it's just being able to be open to the possibility that it won't look like or happen on the timeline or follow some set rubric that you have set up for yourself, and that it could look different, and that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. And it could take you in some places that could bring you a lot of joy and a lot of peace and a lot of some of the other things that you want as well along the way. And that sometimes I think we miss out on that. I like spending time with older people who are reflecting in the sunset years of their lives. And a lot of them talk about how and I'm even feeling that now, right? Like, gosh, I wish I was as thin now as I was when I thought I was fat, right? Like, like all those things that I wish I could just go back and live that moment again and not be worried about what I was worried about in the moment. And I think, there's a way that we all are always going to be that, right? We're always going to be in our moments, worried about what we're worried about at the moment. But there also, I think, can sometimes be that knowledge that's passed down to just stop for a moment and just be like, let me just enjoy this, because everybody tells me if I don't enjoy this now, I'm going to wish I had done this now. Right. So I think that's probably what I would say to my younger self is like, there's only so much of this you can do, but just here's a little nugget, just enjoy it. Just wear that skirt that you think is a few inches too short. Just do it, because you're going to enjoy it. Have fun, do the things, take some risks, try to live life and just enjoy it.
Just do it.
Good stuff. So with the work that you do, how do you think that we can help? How can we help you move this thing forward?
Ooh, this is fun. Okay, so one of the things that I think probably is really good to mention here is, we've been through a really intense political season where we were, voting at the local and at the, county and state and national level. And for those of you in Georgia, you had to do it twice in a matter of months, right? And so what what we've been doing in Sacramento, which I would love to be able to just to share with others and to just be able to say, like, this does not have to be super complicated, is something called our voter guide. We Sacramento Sister Circle and Black Women Organized for Political Action started a voter guide. Now, I believe it's 9 years ago. We have covered every single election in that anybody who is in Sacramento would be voting in. So primary elections, general elections, and we haven't had any special elections, but if we did, we would put a guide out for those as well. And what it has allowed us to do is to come together and to articulate a viewpoint that is specific to Black women, and I am a real believer that because of just the way that Black women have exist as a political entity, that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And very rarely are we choosing anything that would be, bad overall for other communities. We're looking out for the group that is often the most overlooked, and is, the most harmed. We look at housing, right? Black women are the most overburdened by housing, by spending so much of their income on housing. And it makes us, financially insecure in other places. And so when we start talking about housing policy, if you do right by us, everybody else will be in a better position as well. And so what we did was we just literally created a Google Doc and started populating it with, this is what's on the ballot and here's how we think about it. And we write it in our own voice. There's plenty of AAVE, African American Vernacular English, in it. We use pop culture references. We speak the truth of, who people and how policies have impacted our lives. We've articulated our values. We do some voter education in there. When there's a bond measure, we explain what that means and what you should be thinking about as you're evaluating, do you want to incur debt for the next 30 years for this particular purpose? And the whole goal is to make it so that people who are engaged and want to vote can think about how they can be good allies if they're not part of the community of Black people or Black women in particular, how they can be good allies, and also to be able to help to streamline the process, because we spend hours researching and looking through people's records and looking through the impact of things, and engaging, the community in this, doing interviews with candidates and really trying to get to the heart of some of these issues in a way to be able to make it so that other people don't have to. And it really started with just people taking their ballot and saying, hey, what y'all got on this, this proposition? Oh, well, while we're here, what does anybody know about this one? Like, well, my org actually wrote that one. Let me tell you what it does and what it doesn't do, right? And and just going through the ballot like that. And it's one of those things where it's been so impactful locally. We cover everything that's going to be on the Sacramento ballot. So people outside of Sacramento use it for the portions of it that are like statewide, elected offices, or, if there's something on it that we're all voting on together, people really look to it for, what do you have on the statewide propositions and what do you have on the statewide offices and how does this work? And I have been, saying for a while, it would be great if we could not only share this model with others, but really encourage other people to put it together, because this goes back to, like, this is not something that we are paid to do. It is still in a Google Doc that we just put on the website and we put it out, and some of the churches share it and they put it in their bulletins, and they, people have really it's become a word of mouth thing where we've had some publications that picked it up and published and said, like, hey, here's a guide for you that's put out. But we really have not spent money. What we spent was our time and our talent and our interest in being able to produce this. And I'd love to be able to see groups of Black women or even other communities, Black men get together and put one. I'd love to see folks get together in their communities and put something like this together, so that when we're telling people to go out and vote, we're not requiring of them to have to do hours and hours of research, but we're also trying to distill some of that down and explain some things. And people will say to us, like, I didn't vote the same as y'all on this, but I really appreciated the breakdown, the rationale you gave for why you came to this or why you were supporting this candidate over the other one, because it helped me think through the issues for myself. And I really think that's the ultimate goal, is not that to get people to vote like us, but to get people to think through some of the issues that we're thinking through as we're making those decisions.
Yeah, we really need people who are educated voters, right? We lose some folks just because they're not educated on what that issue is. We talk about the big stuff a lot of times, but not necessarily the education that goes along with knowing what those other things are that are down ballot, right? And we really need somebody who's breaking down those issues. Shatay is usually my study person. We sometimes are actively in the car, like, okay, babe, what is this about? What are we supposed to be doing?
Yep.
And so that information is very much needed. So we really appreciate you giving that to us.
Yeah, and we were talking beforehand how like it took me a couple hours to get through, the ballots, the issues that were on the ballot recently, and even then I was still kind of a little uncertain about it. I feel like I definitely want to bring something like that to Atlanta. If I'm being transparent, I feel intimidated because I'm like, who am I to like what? Why would anyone listen to me on something like that? I am great at researching, so I'm happy to like research some things and put it down. So I'll have to find some folks locally who'll support that. We can pull in some line sisters and we can make it happen. So
yes. Yeah, I mean, don't feel like who are you? Like it was literally a Google Doc, and for the first couple of years, it was just me. Like, and then I was like, okay. As it got bigger, because at first it was just a thing for our Facebook page of like, here's where we are, and people would like comment, and we'd add things in like, ooh, you should also say this, this, and this, right? And so it still is a living document, in that if things happen after we publish it, we go back in and we say, this person came out against, rent control, and we think that's terrible, and so we want you to know that. But like, it's also now, there are about 15 of us that come together and do it. So we split up the ballot, and sometimes we have 2 people working on it, and you'll do oppo research and we'll do pro research, and then we'll come together and write it together. And so it really is kind of a lot of fun because we get a chance to talk through issues. And there were a couple on the ballot where we were like back and forth, like, should we say yes or should we say no on this? And like, what are the pros and what are the cons? And so, and then how do we write it once we decide so that people know where we're coming from? And so I would just say to anybody, listening to you, Shatay, and to you, Scott, as you're thinking about this, like, it doesn't have to be that deep. And you have lots of people who can help out. And then as it grows, you say, okay, look, we need some more people to get involved in this and whatever else. But your voice is enough, and you're going to do a good amount of research, and you can articulate. And we even have, we have now 8 or 10, past ballots that you could always look to on ours in terms of how we structure things and what we, how we covered it and how we talk about it. So you don't feel intimidated at all.
Look, that's just imposter syndrome showing up for Shatay. I'm not gonna let her walk in that. And you go ahead and nudge her towards her greatness too. She gets y'all on the LS Tech. Yeah, okay. Y'all go ahead and do that. So one of the things that Shatay and I are very passionate about is music. We have theme songs and playlists for pretty much everything in our lives. So this season we've really been asking our guests for their music for the moment. Like if you can think of any song, what's your music that kind of gives words to the work that you do? What does this moment feel like for you?
Ooh, this is a very good question. Okay, so I'm now on Spotify. I have been for now a couple of years, and so I curate playlists on Spotify. So the way that I have put my playlist together have been around like, what mood do I want to be in? So and then sometimes it's just to be funny, like as an exercise. So my favorite playlist of all is one that is called Ode to the Booty. And it's all songs about big butts and what they're able to do. And so I constantly update it. It's just, I love this playlist so much. Because, odes to the booty is often sung about, but at the same time, sometimes relegated to a lesser status in our admiration of the human form than it should be. And I really feel like it needs to be lionized in our minds, and in our hearts and in our appreciation. So that's one of my favorite ones. I have another one that my husband Terrain and I put together earlier last year that we called our Rona list. And it's all songs that have something to do with coronavirus. But it may be like the title of the song, it may be the chorus, or there may be a line in the song that relates in some way. And so that's another one of my favorite ones, because I laugh sometimes, like when I'm going through the list and I'm like, why do we put this on there? oh, this is why, right? And they're just so like, we start with Let Me Clear My Throat, and then we talk about, I'm Dangerous. We have Twist His Heartbeat. We have Breathe and Stop. We have, Little Flips, Game Over. Like, we have just like all these songs that you have to like, and then we get into the social distancing one. And so we have like Ludacris's Move. We have, Weight Me Down. We have Back That Thing Up. Like, it's really fun just going through the playlist because it'll take you through different moods, but it's all about like the way, we have Brandy sitting up in my room. Like, it's just a fun way of being able to make something lighthearted about what we're all going through. And it was really fun being able to put it together and adding all these songs and be like, ooh, did we put this one? And, like Beyonce's Me, Myself, and I. To be able to think about like why we would put these things in. So yeah.
I am going to officially follow the Rona playlist. Is that what it's called?
It's called Rona List. I can send you the links. Yeah.
I'm gonna use Ode to the Booty.
Ode to the Booty is a good. Listen, it's a good time, Scott. It's just a good time.
I know it is.
Start to finish, good time.
Flo, this has been such a good conversation. I feel like not only are we sharing information I think that other people can find useful, but I feel like I've been inspired, encouraged, challenged to think a little bit differently, which I'm always here for. One of my favorite things actually is to kind of have diversity of thought in the conversations that I'm in. So I really, really appreciate that.
I really feel like you helped us like dig through the epidemiology of purpose.
Yeah.
We really just kind of delved off into that thing. So we're gonna have some secondary discussion, I'm sure, about that as well. A whole different groove. But I appreciate like the conversation just being allowed to go where it went. And that is just been awesome. Really appreciate you, Flo.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. This was so much fun. I didn't know we were going to be quite so philosophical this morning, but it was good to think about like the what and the why. And some of them, as I was answering, I was like, I have thought about like, I think I sometimes have thoughts and like, or have conversations in my head that don't always happen out loud. And so it's not until somebody asks that question that I'm like, I have thought about that. And this is what, like, these are the pieces of that like have kind of come together for me. So it's cool sometimes to like overtly learn the things that are happening sometimes in my subconscious that I haven't put together. So that was really helpful for me too. Like, I thought about that. And this is how that plays out. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. It's been beautiful. I appreciate you, sis. That is all that we have for today. We want to thank everybody for listening in. And until next time, we want to challenge you to pull up to your purpose.
Pull up.
Is that like pull up to my bumper, baby? Is that like pull up?
That too.
We'll have to put that on the list too.
Why'd you take so long to come to me? Oh, baby. And love. Tell me, were you hiding from me all the time? Each time.